The late autumn sun painted Manhattan's skyline in hues of amber and gold, casting long shadows through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Ethan Carter's penthouse office. At 35, he stood at the pinnacle of New York's corporate world, his silhouette cutting a commanding figure against the city's glittering backdrop. The tailored Tom Ford suit couldn't hide the tension in his shoulders as he watched the city pulse 60 stories below, his mind replaying the events of the morning's board meeting over and over. For the first time in his 15-year reign as CEO of Carter Enterprises, Ethan had been outmaneuvered. The taste of defeat was foreign on his tongue, bitter, yet strangely intoxicating because it came from her, Sophia Wren. The memory of her entrance into the boardroom was seared into his mind. She had commanded attention without demanding it, her Hermes heels clicking against the marble floor with quiet confidence. The charcoal pencil skirt and cream silk blouse spoke of understated elegance, but it was her eyes that had captured him. Amber flames danced in those irises, intelligence and determination radiating from every glance. Ethan's fingers traced the cool glass of the window as he remembered how she had systematically dismantled his acquisition strategy. Her voice, smooth as aged whiskey but sharp as a razor's edge, had cut through every argument his team presented. She hadn't raised her voice once she hadn't needed to. Every word was precisely chosen, every point delivered with devastating accuracy. "Mr. Carter," she had said, her gaze meeting his across the polished expanse of the conference table, "your offer undervalues not just our assets but our potential. Wren Financial isn't just another trophy for your collection." The corner of his mouth curved up at the memory. Trophy? If anyone was worthy of that term, it was Sophia herself, but she wasn't a prize to be won. She was a force of nature, a brilliant storm that had blown through his carefully ordered world and left him questioning everything he thought he knew about desire. His phone buzzed, drawing his attention to the latest market reports. Carter Enterprises stock had dipped slightly after the failed acquisition attempt, but Ethan barely registered the numbers. Instead, his mind wandered to the intelligence he'd gathered about Sophia Wren over the past few hours. Harvard Business School, summa cum laude, youngest partner in Wren Financial's history, philanthropist, with a focus on inner-city education. No scandals, no controversies, just a sterling reputation built on intelligence and integrity. The society pages occasionally mentioned her at charity galas, but she kept her private life carefully guarded. Ethan moved to his desk, fingers hovering over the invitation to tonight's Metropolitan Museum charity gala. He had nearly canceled, his pride still smarting from the morning's defeat, but now, knowing she would be there, wild horses couldn't keep him away. The sun dipped lower, casting his office in deepening shadows. Ethan loosened his tie, running a hand through his dark hair as he contemplated his next move. In the cutthroat world of Manhattan finance, he had earned a reputation as a strategic genius, the king of calculated risks, but something about Sophia Wren made him want to throw calculation to the wind. His assistant's voice crackled over the intercom. "Mr. Carter, your car is ready." "Thank you, Nora." He gathered his things, each movement deliberate as he prepared for the evening ahead. The weight of his watch, a Patek Philippe handed down from his father, reminded him of everything he had built, everything he stood to lose if he made the wrong move. But for the first time in his life, the potential for loss thrilled rather than terrified him. The elevator ride to the lobby gave him time to study his reflection in the mirrored walls. The same face that had graced countless magazine covers stared back at him. Strong jawline, penetrating blue eyes, the slight curl of dark hair at his temples that gave him a rakish air despite his polished appearance. Women had always found him attractive, but their interest had always seemed tied to his bank account rather than his character. Sophia had looked at him differently. When she challenged him in that boardroom, her gaze had stripped away his wealth, his status, his carefully constructed facade. She had seen him, really seen him, and found him wanting. The thought should have angered him, but instead, it lit a fire in his chest. The lobby of Carter Tower was quiet at this hour, his footsteps echoing across Italian marble as he made his way to the waiting car. Michael, his driver of 10 years, held the door with a knowing smile. "The Metropolitan Museum, sir?" "Yes, Michael." Ethan settled into the leather seat, his mind already racing ahead to the evening. "But take the scenic route through the park." As the car glided into Manhattan traffic, Ethan found himself remembering more details from the morning. The way Sophia's fingers had wrapped around her Mont Blanc pen, the subtle fragrance of jasmine that drifted across the table when she leaned forward to make a point, the slight tilt of her head when she was considering her next move. Central Park passed by in a blur of autumn colors, but Ethan barely noticed. He was too busy planning his approach. The usual techniques wouldn't work with someone like Sophia Wren. She would see through any artificial charm, any practiced lines. For the first time in years, he would have to be completely genuine. The thought was terrifying and exhilarating. His phone buzzed again, this time with a message from his brother, Nathan. Heard about the Wren financial deal. Tough break. Drowning your sorrows at the gala? Ethan's reply was cryptic. Sometimes losing opens up unexpected opportunities. The car turned onto Fifth Avenue, joining the line of luxury vehicles depositing Manhattan's elite at the Metropolitan Museum's imposing entrance. Through the tinted window, Ethan caught glimpses of flowing gowns and camera flashes. Somewhere in that glittering crowd, Sophia Wren waited. Michael opened the car door, and Ethan emerged into the cool evening air. The steps of the Met were illuminated like a scene from a dream, with hundreds of tiny lights twinkling in the gathering dusk. As he straightened his bow tie and prepared to ascend, Ethan felt something he hadn't experienced since his first major acquisition: butterflies in his stomach. The grand entrance hall of the Metropolitan Museum had been transformed for the evening. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over the marble floors, while arrangements of white orchids and roses created an atmosphere of ethereal elegance. The city's most powerful figures moved through the space like pieces on a chessboard, each interaction carefully calculated for maximum advantage. Ethan accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter, using the moment to scan the crowd. Every few steps, someone would try to engage him in conversation about the markets, about his latest tech ventures, about the upcoming social season. He responded with practiced ease, but his attention remained divided. And then he saw her. Sophia Wren stood near the Temple of Dendur, the ancient Egyptian structure providing a dramatic backdrop for her entrance. The emerald silk of her gown caught the light like liquid jewels, flowing over her curves with breathtaking elegance. Her dark skin glowed golden in the warm lighting, and her hair was swept up in an intricate style that emphasized the graceful line of her neck. She was engaged in conversation with the city's ballet director, her hands moving expressively as she spoke. Even from a distance, Ethan could see the passion in her gestures, the same intensity that had captivated him in the boardroom, now directed toward what appeared to be a discussion of the arts. His heart began to race, a sensation so foreign that it took him a moment to identify it. Ethan Carter, the man who could negotiate billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, was nervous about approaching a woman at a charity gala, but Sophia Wren was no ordinary woman. He watched as she excused herself from her conversation, moving toward the bar with that same fluid grace he remembered from the morning. Without conscious thought, his feet began carrying him in the same direction. The crowd seemed to part before him, whether from his reputation or the intensity of his expression. He neither knew nor cared. She sensed his approach, he could tell by the subtle straightening of her spine, the slight pause in her step. When she turned to face him, those amber eyes widened almost imperceptibly, and Ethan felt his world narrow to this single moment. "Mr. Carter," she greeted him, her voice carrying that same whiskey-smooth quality that had haunted his thoughts all day. "Come to negotiate better terms?" The playful challenge in her tone made his pulse quicken. "Actually," he replied, signaling the bartender for 2 fresh glasses of champagne, "I came to admit defeat." He paused, holding her gaze as he offered her one of the glasses, and perhaps to negotiate something entirely different. A hint of curiosity flickered across her features as she accepted the champagne. "I wasn't aware the great Ethan Carter ever admitted defeat. There's a lot you don't know about me, Miss Wren." He took a deliberate sip of his champagne, never breaking eye contact, though I find myself hoping to change that. The ghost of a smile played at the corners of her mouth. "Careful, Mr. Carter. People might think you're flirting with the enemy." "Enemy is such a harsh word," he countered, taking a step closer. The subtle scent of jasmine enveloped him again, making his head spin more than any champagne could. "I prefer to think of us as worthy opponents." A soft laugh escaped her lips, the sound sending shivers down his spine. And what does a worthy opponent propose? Ethan's voice dropped lower, meant for her ears alone. One night, no business, no negotiations, no hidden agendas. Just two people getting to know each other beyond the boardroom. She studied him with those penetrating eyes. And Ethan felt as though she could see straight through to his soul. The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility. You're used to getting what you want, aren't you, Mr. Carter? Not from you, he admitted, the honesty surprising them both. That's what makes you fascinating. The orchestra began to play, the soft strains of a waltz floating through the air. Sophia took a thoughtful sip of her champagne, and Ethan found himself mesmerized by the movement of her throat, the way her long fingers wrapped around the delicate stem of the glass. One night, she finally said, placing her empty glass on a passing waiter's tray, "But don't mistake curiosity for surrender, Mr. Carter." "Ethan," he corrected softly, offering his hand. "If we're leaving business behind, I think we can dispense with formalities." Her fingers slipped into his, and electricity shot through his entire body. "Ethan," she tested the name, and he had never heard it sound more perfect. "Shall we see if you're as skilled at dancing as you are at corporate takeovers?" As he led her to the dance floor, Ethan knew with absolute certainty that his life would never be the same after this night. The woman in his arms had already begun to remake his world, and he couldn't wait to discover what other changes she would bring. The night stretched before them like an unwritten story, full of promise and possibility. As they began to move to the music, their bodies finding a natural rhythm together, Ethan realized that for the first time in his life, he didn't want to be anywhere else but here, in this moment, with this extraordinary woman who had challenged everything he thought he knew about himself. The magnetic pull that had drawn him to her that morning had only grown stronger. As they danced beneath the sparkling chandeliers, surrounded by the elite of Manhattan society, Ethan Carter understood that he was standing on the edge of something profound. For once in his life, he was ready to take a leap without calculating the risks, because some things, he was beginning to learn, were worth risking everything for. Chapter 2. Electric Touch. The Metropolitan Museum's Grand Hall breathed with ancient magic that night, its marble columns reaching skyward, like silent guardians of the evening's possibilities. Through the expansive glass ceiling, stars winked down at the gathering of New York's elite, as if they, too, were curious about the story unfolding beneath them. The Temple of Dendur cast long shadows across the polished floor, its weathered stone a testament to enduring passions. Sophia Wren felt the weight of the evening settling around her shoulders like a silk shawl. The emerald gown she wore, a custom Versace creation, whispered against the marble floor with each step, its color a striking contrast against her dark skin. She had chosen it carefully not for the generous donors or society photographers, but for herself. Tonight, she needed to feel invincible. The morning's victory over Carter Enterprises still sang in her veins, but it was tempered by something else. Something that made her pulse quicken every time she remembered piercing blue eyes and the way they had studied her across the boardroom table. Ethan Carter had been everything the magazines claimed, devastatingly handsome, commanding, intense. But they hadn't captured the electricity that seemed to crackle in the air around him, the magnetic pull that made it impossible to look away. She lifted a hand to touch the collar of diamonds at her throat, her grandmother's legacy, and a reminder of everything she had worked for. 3 generations of Wren women had fought to create something lasting in a world that tried to deny them at every turn. She wouldn't let one magnetically attractive CEO distract her from that legacy, no matter how his gaze made her skin tingle. The string quartet's music floated through the air, mixing with the gentle murmur of conversations and the crystalline sound of champagne glasses clinking. Sophia moved through the crowd with practiced ease, accepting compliments on her successful defense against the Carter takeover, with gracious smiles that never quite reached her eyes. Her mind kept drifting back to the dance they had shared, to the way Ethan's hand had felt against the small of her back, strong and sure, yet somehow gentle. "Miss Wren," a familiar voice called, and she turned to see Charles Henderson, one of her firm's biggest clients, approaching with his wife. "Spectacular work this morning. The way you handled Carter, I haven't seen anything like it in 20 years on Wall Street." Sophia accepted the praise with a modest nod, but before she could respond, she felt it, that electric charge in the air that meant he was near. She didn't need to turn around to know Ethan Carter had entered the room. The subtle shift in the energy of the crowd, the way conversations hushed and reformed around his presence, told her everything. "Thank you, Charles," she replied, keeping her voice steady despite the way her heart had begun to race. "But tonight isn't about business deals. How is Eleanor's scholarship foundation coming along?" As Mrs. Henderson launched into an enthusiastic description of their latest charitable venture, Sophia allowed herself one glance over her shoulder. Ethan stood near the entrance, his black tuxedo impeccably tailored to his athletic frame. The sight of him made her breath catch. He moved with the confidence of a man who knew his own power, yet there was something different about him tonight. Vulnerability in the way he searched the crowd that made her wonder if he was looking for her. Their eyes met across the sea of evening gowns and tuxedos, and the world seemed to still. The chandelier light caught the silver at his temples, and his lips curved into a smile that seemed meant only for her. Sophia felt heat rise to her cheeks and quickly turned back to her conversation, but her skin tingled with the knowledge that he was watching. She excused herself from the Hendersons and made her way toward the bar, needing a moment to collect herself. The bartender was just placing a glass of champagne in front of her when she felt his presence behind her, like a warm shadow that carried the scent of cedar and something uniquely masculine. "I believe I owe you a dance." Ethan's voice was low and intimate, sending shivers down her spine, "unless you're still maintaining that professional distance." Sophia turned, champagne glass in hand, to find him even closer than she'd expected. His blue eyes sparkled with challenge and something deeper hunger that matched the one she'd been trying to ignore all evening. "Professional distance?" She arched an eyebrow, fighting to keep her voice level. "Is that what you call standing outside my office for 2 hours this afternoon?" A flash of surprise crossed his features before his smile widened. "You saw me. My assistant has a rather comprehensive security system." She took a deliberate sip of champagne, using the moment to study him up close. She could see the faint stubble along his jaw, evidence that he'd been too preoccupied to shave again before the gala. The detail humanized him somehow, made him more than just the corporate titan whose face graced magazine covers. "And yet you didn't send security to escort me away," he noted, his voice carrying a hint of triumph. Could it be that the formidable Sophia Wren was curious about why I stayed? The orchestra began a new piece, Strauss's Blue Danube Waltz, and Ethan held out his hand. The gesture was both an invitation and a challenge, just like the man himself. Sophia found herself setting down her champagne glass and placing her hand in his before she could second-guess the decision. His fingers closed around hers, warm and strong, and that same electric current she'd felt during their first dance shot through her body. He led her onto the dance floor with the confidence of a man who had spent years in ballrooms, but there was nothing practiced about the way he drew her into his arms. "You never answered my question," he murmured as they began to move with the music, his hand on her waist respectful but possessing a gentle pressure that made her intensely aware of every point of contact between them. "About why I didn't have you removed." Sophia matched his steps perfectly, her body somehow knowing exactly how to move with his. "Perhaps I wanted to see how long the great Ethan Carter would wait when he wasn't getting what he wanted." His laugh was genuine, rumbling through his chest in a way she could feel against her palm. "And what did you conclude from your experiment? That you're either more patient or more stubborn than your reputation suggests?" She allowed him to guide her through a turn, their bodies moving closer together as they navigated around other couples. "I haven't decided which yet. Maybe I'm something else entirely." His voice dropped lower, meant only for her ears, something your research and reputation reports couldn't reveal. The intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. This close, she could see flecks of steel gray in the blue of his irises, could feel the strength in his frame carefully held in check as he led her through the dance. Everything about him radiated power and control, yet there was a gentleness in the way his thumb traced small circles on her hand that made her wonder what else those business reports had missed. "And what would that be?" she challenged, trying to maintain her composure despite the way her heart was racing. Ethan guided her into another turn, this one bringing them even closer together. When he spoke, his lips were near her ear, his breath warm against her skin. "Let me show you. Have dinner with me tonight, somewhere away from all this pretense. Just Ethan and Sophia. No titles, no corporate warfare." The invitation hung between them like a glittering thread of possibility. Sophia knew she should refuse. She had built her career on careful decisions, on never letting emotion cloud her judgment. But there was something in Ethan's eyes that spoke to a part of her she'd kept carefully hidden, the part that believed in magic and midnight possibilities. "Your negotiations need work," she said finally, her lips curving into a smile that sounded more like a command than an invitation. His answering smile was both rueful and charming. "You're right. I'm used to being in control, but with you." He spun her out and drew her back in one fluid movement that left her breathless. "With you, I'm learning to ask instead of demand. Please, Sophia, have dinner with me." The music was building to its crescendo, and couples whirled around them in a blur of color and motion. But Sophia saw only Ethan saw the genuine hope in his eyes, the slight tension in his jaw that betrayed how much her answer meant to him. "One dinner," she conceded, feeling something shift in the air between them, but not at Le Cirque or Daniel or any other place where we'll be surrounded by board members and shareholders. The joy that lit up his face transformed him from handsome to breathtaking. "I know just the place. Trust me." The question carried more weight than its simple words suggested. Sophia studied him for a long moment as the music began to fade. "I trust you to choose a restaurant," she said carefully. "The rest remains to be seen." Ethan's hand tightened slightly on her waist as the dance ended, as if reluctant to let her go. "I'll take that as a challenge rather than a rejection." He stepped back and brought her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles that sent sparks of electricity up her arm. "Shall we?" Without waiting for her answer, he began leading her through the crowd toward the museum's grand entrance. Sophia felt the eyes of Manhattan's elite following their progress, knew there would be speculation in tomorrow's society pages, but for once, she found she didn't care. The night air was crisp when they emerged onto the museum steps, carrying the first hints of autumn. Ethan's hand found the small of her back as he guided her down to where a sleek black Bentley waited at the curb. The driver, Michael, she remembered from her background research on Carter Enterprises, held the door with a discreet smile. "After you," Ethan murmured, and as Sophia slid into the leather interior, she felt as though she was crossing a threshold that would change everything. The way Ethan looked at her as he joined her in the car, his eyes dark with promise in the city lights, told her he felt it too. As the car pulled away from the curb, Sophia Wren, the woman who had built her reputation on never taking unnecessary risks, found herself excited by the uncertainty of what lay ahead. The night stretched before them like an unwritten story, and for the first time in years, she wanted to see how it would end. The Bentley glided through Manhattan streets, and Sophia watched the city lights dance across Ethan's profile. He was speaking quietly with Michael about their destination, and the intimate domesticity of the moment struck her. This wasn't the corporate raider from the morning's boardroom or even the polished society figure from the gala. This was simply Ethan, a man who had waited in the rain just to see her again. Perhaps, she thought, as his hand found hers in the darkness of the car, some risks were worth taking after all. The city seemed to hold its breath around them, as if it, too, was waiting to see what would happen when two forces of nature collided. As they turned onto a quiet street in Little Italy, Sophia felt the last of her professional armor falling away, replaced by a sensation she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Possibility. Whatever happened next, she knew this night would change everything, and for once, that thought didn't terrify her, it thrilled her to her core. Chapter 3. Walls of Glass. The Bentley slowed to a stop on a quiet cobblestone street in Little Italy, where strings of warm lights crisscrossed overhead like a canopy of stars. Sophia felt Ethan's eyes on her as she took in their surroundings. The historic buildings with their wrought iron fire escapes and window boxes still blooming with late autumn flowers. This wasn't the Manhattan of gleaming skyscrapers and power lunches. This was a pocket of old-world charm that seemed to exist in its own time stream. "La Piccola Rosa," Ethan said softly as Michael opened the car door. "It's been in the same family for 4 generations. No Michelin stars, no write-ups in the Times, just authentic Italian food and privacy." Sophia finished, understanding dawning as she accepted his hand and stepped onto the cobblestones. Her stilettos clicked against the ancient stone as Ethan guided her toward an unmarked wooden door with frosted glass windows that glowed warmly from within. The door opened before they reached it, and an elderly Italian woman with silver hair and laugh lines around her eyes greeted them with obvious affection. "Ethan, il ragazzo." Mama Rosa's face lit up with genuine warmth as he bent to kiss her cheeks. "And who is this beautiful signorina?" "Mama Rosa, this is Sophia Wren. Sophia, meet Rosalinda Castellano, the heart and soul of La Piccola Rosa, and the woman who made sure I didn't starve during my first year of building Carter Enterprises." "Ah," he exaggerates. Mama Rosa waved off the praise, but her eyes sparkled as she took Sophia's hands in hers. "But this one, he worked too hard back then all day in his tiny office, forgetting to eat until I would bring him pasta. Now look at him, a big shot who still remembers his old friends." Something in Sophia's chest tightened at the image of a younger Ethan, hungry and determined, being cared for by this maternal figure. It was so far from the polished CEO image he presented to the world, yet it felt more real than any magazine profile she'd read about him. Mama Rosa led them through the intimate restaurant, past tables where couples and families sat enjoying their meals without a single phone or camera in sight. The walls were covered in black and white photographs documenting the restaurant's history, and the air was rich with the aromas of garlic, fresh herbs, and wood-fired bread. Their table was in a private alcove, lit by candles and a single pendant lamp that cast a soft golden glow. A bottle of wine was already breathing in, a crystal decanter, and fresh flowers, white roses, and sprigs of lavender created a simple but elegant centerpiece. Ethan held her chair with old-world courtesy, and as Sophia settled into her seat, she caught the lingering scent of his cologne, something subtle and masculine that made her pulse quicken. When he took his own seat across from her, the candlelight caught the angles of his face in a way that softened his usual intensity into something more vulnerable. "So," she said, running a finger along the stem of her wineglass, "this is where Ethan Carter goes when he's not being the king of Wall Street." His lips curved into a smile that held none of his boardroom bravado. "This is where I come to remember who I was before the titles and the acquisitions. When I first moved to New York, I had nothing but ambition and a business plan that every major investor had rejected. I couldn't afford an office, so I would sit here for hours, working on my laptop and drinking endless cups of espresso. Mama Rosa." He paused, his expression softening with memory. She saw something in me worth believing in. Sophia felt her carefully constructed walls wavering as she watched him pour the wine. A vintage Barolo that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, yet he served it with the same unpretentious grace that seemed to characterize this hidden sanctuary. "And now?" she asked, accepting her glass. "What does the great Ethan Carter believe in?" Their eyes met over the rim of their wineglasses, and the air between them charged with electricity. "Tonight, I believe in taking chances. In the possibility that sometimes losing a corporate battle might lead to winning something far more valuable." The wine was exceptional, its complex notes of roses and tar dancing on her tongue. But it was Ethan's gaze that made her feel intoxicated. There was something disarming about him here, away from the spotlight that usually followed his every move. The sharp business suit had been replaced by an expertly tailored tuxedo that he wore with casual elegance, his bow tie now slightly loosened in a way that drew her eyes to the strong column of his throat. "You're very sure of yourself," she observed, though her tone held more warmth than criticism. "What makes you think I'm interested in being one?" Ethan leaned forward slightly, the candlelight creating shadows that emphasized the intensity of his expression. "Because you're here, Sophia. You could have dismissed me as another corporate raider trying to add your company to his collection. You could have had security remove me from your building this afternoon. You could have turned down my dinner invitation. But something made you say yes, the same, something that made me stand in the rain for 2 hours just to see you again." Before she could respond, Mama Rosa appeared with a plate of antipasti that hadn't been ordered but looked absolutely perfect. Fresh burrata with heirloom tomatoes, paper-thin prosciutto, marinated artichokes, and olives that glistened in the candlelight. "Eat, eat," she insisted, her maternal instincts apparently extending to all of Ethan's guests. "You young people work too hard. Forget to enjoy life's pleasures. Love needs good food to grow strong." Sophia felt heat rise to her cheeks at the assumption, but Ethan's laugh was warm and genuine. "Grazie, Mama Rosa. Everything looks wonderful." As the elderly woman bustled away, Sophia found herself studying Ethan with new eyes. The way he interacted with Mama Rosa revealed layers she hadn't expected, a capacity for genuine connection that went beyond networking and business relationships. "You're surprised," he noted, offering her the burrata with a gesture that managed to be both gallant and natural. "Did you expect me to take you to the latest trendy restaurant where we'd be surrounded by paparazzi and social climbers?" "Honestly, yes." Sophia accepted the offering, the fresh cheese melting on her tongue in a way that made her close her eyes briefly in pleasure. When she opened them, she found Ethan watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Your reputation suggests you enjoy the spotlight." "My reputation," he said thoughtfully, swirling the wine in his glass, "is a carefully crafted tool. It serves its purpose in the business world, but here—" He gestured to their intimate surroundings. "This is real. No cameras, no shareholders, no corporate strategies. Just a man hoping to know the woman behind the brilliant mind that outmaneuvered him this morning." The honesty in his voice made something shift inside her chest. Sophia had built her own walls carefully over the years, protecting herself in a world that often viewed her as an animalia young black woman who had risen to the top of the financial world through sheer brilliance and determination. But something about Ethan's vulnerability made her want to lower those defenses. Just a little. "The woman behind the brilliant mind," she repeated softly, meeting his gaze. "Are you sure you're ready for that, Ethan? I'm not just the ice queen of Wall Street, but I'm also not going to be another conquest for New York's most eligible bachelor." Instead of being offended, Ethan's expression grew more intense. "Do you know what I thought when I first saw you this morning, before you systematically dismantled my acquisition strategy?" He leaned forward, his voice dropping to an intimate murmur that sent shivers down her spine. "I thought, finally, someone who sees beyond the surface, who challenges me to be better, who makes me want to prove I'm more than my reputation suggests." "Oh." The air between them crackled with tension, and Sophia found herself leaning in slightly, drawn by the magnetic pull of his presence. "And what are you trying to prove tonight?" "That chemistry like this," his hand moved across the table until his fingers were just brushing hers, sending electric currents up her arm, "deserves to be explored. That two people who've spent their lives building walls might find something extraordinary if they dare to be vulnerable with each other." The touch of his fingers against hers was like a live wire, making her skin tingle and her heart race. Sophia knew she should pull away, maintain the professional distance that had served her so well over the years, but something in Ethan's eyes, a mixture of hope, desire, and genuine curiosity, made her leave, her hand where it was. One night, she reminded him, though her voice wasn't as steady as she would have liked, "That was our agreement." His thumb traced a gentle circle on her palm, the simple gesture somehow more intimate than any kiss. "One night to begin with," he corrected softly, "but I think we both know that this isn't going to be enough." Before she could respond, Mama Rosa returned with their primi piatti, handmade tagliatelle with white truffles for Ethan and ricotta-filled ravioli in a delicate sage butter sauce for Sophia. The scents were intoxicating, but not as much as the way Ethan's eyes never left her face as their hands reluctantly separated. As they began to eat, their conversation flowed naturally, from business to personal passions. Sophia found herself sharing stories about her grandmother, who had started Wren Financial from nothing and taught her the value of both ambition and integrity. Ethan spoke about his younger brother, Nathan, who chose to become a doctor instead of joining the family business, and how proud he was of him for following his own path. The walls they had both built began to show hairline cracks, letting glimpses of their true selves shine through. When Ethan described his first failed startup and how it had taught him more than any success, Sophia found herself sharing her own moments of doubt and determination. Each story, each shared laugh, each meaningful glance over their wine glasses added another thread to the connection growing between them. By the time Mama Rosa brought out their dessert, a shared plate of tiramisu that seemed to melt on the tongue, Sophia realized she had completely lost track of time. The restaurant had emptied around them, but their private alcove felt like a world unto itself, where titles and reputations held no power compared to the authenticity of their connection. "Dance with me," Ethan said suddenly, standing and offering his hand. No music played, but the silence held its own kind of melody. Sophia glanced around at their intimate surroundings. Why not? His smile held a trace of that rakish charm that had made him Manhattan's most sought-after bachelor, but his eyes were sincere. No audience, no expectations, just us. Perhaps it was the wine, or the magic of the evening, or simply the way he looked at her like she was the only woman in the world, but Sophia found herself placing her hand in his. Ethan drew her to her feet and into his arms with gentle confidence, one hand settling at her waist while the other held hers over his heart. They swayed together in the candlelight, moving to music only they could hear. Sophia could feel Ethan's heartbeat under her palm, strong and slightly fast, matching the tempo of her own. His cologne wrapped around her like a warm embrace, and when she looked up to meet his eyes, she found him watching her with an expression that made her breath catch. "What are you thinking?" she whispered, afraid to break the spell of the moment but needing to know. Ethan's hand tightened slightly at her waist, drawing her imperceptibly closer. "I'm thinking that I've never felt more alive than I do right now, dancing with no music in an empty restaurant with a woman who challenges everything I thought I knew about myself." The honesty in his voice made her walls tremble dangerously. "Ethan, I know," he murmured, his thumb tracing patterns on her lower back that sent shivers up her spine. "One night. No expectations. But Sophia." He pulled back just enough to meet her eyes, and the intensity of his gaze took her breath away. "I want you to know that whatever happens after tonight, this is real. What I feel when I'm with you, it's more real than any business deal or corporate victory I've ever experienced." Sophia felt herself swaying closer, drawn by the gravity of his presence and the truth she saw in his eyes. Their faces were inches apart now, and she could feel the warmth of his breath against her lips. The moment stretched between them like a thread of gold, fragile and precious. "Prove it," she whispered, surprising herself with her boldness. Ethan's hand moved from her waist to her cheek, his touch impossibly gentle. "With pleasure," he murmured, and then his lips were on hers. The kiss was soft at first, a question more than a demand, but when Sophia's lips parted beneath his, it deepened into something that made her knees weak. Ethan kissed like he did everything else with, focused intensity and surprising tenderness. His hand slid into her hair, careful not to disturb its elegant style, while his other arm wrapped around her waist, supporting her as she melted against him. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Sophia found herself clinging to his shoulders. Ethan rested his forehead against hers, his breath uneven. "Still think this is just about winning?" he asked softly. Sophia looked up into his eyes, seeing past the powerful CEO to the man beneath a man who had waited in the rain just to see her smile, who remembered the names of restaurant staff and treated them like family, who looked at her like she was something precious rather than just another acquisition target. "No," she admitted, running her fingers along the lapel of his tuxedo, "but that doesn't make it any less dangerous." His smile was gentle but determined. "The best things in life usually are." He pressed a soft kiss to her forehead. "Let me take you home." The ride back to her brownstone was charged with unspoken possibilities. They sat closer than strictly necessary in the back of the Bentley, their fingers intertwined on the leather seat between them. The city lights painted patterns across their faces as they moved through the quiet streets, each lost in thoughts of what this night meant and what might come next. When they reached her gate, Ethan helped her out of the car with the same gentlemanly grace he'd shown all evening. But as they stood there beneath the amber glow of the street lamp, Sophia felt the weight of choice pressing down on her. "Thank you for dinner," she said softly, her hand still in his. "It was just the beginning," Ethan finished, bringing her hand to his lips for a kiss that made her pulse race. "Sweet dreams, Sophia Wren." As she watched him return to the car, Sophia touched her lips, still tingling from their kiss. The walls she'd built around her heart had developed definite cracks, and for the first time in her life, she wasn't sure she wanted to repair them. Sometimes, she was beginning to realize, the most courageous thing you could do was let someone in. Chapter 4. Symphony of Hearts. The morning sun painted Manhattan in shades of possibility as Sophia stood at her office window, coffee growing cold in her hands. Sleep had eluded her after Ethan's departure, her mind replaying every moment of their evening together. The way his eyes had softened in the candlelight, the gentle pressure of his fingers against hers, the kiss that had shattered her carefully constructed defenses. Her phone buzzed on her desk, and her heart skipped when she saw his name. "Good morning, beautiful. I hope you dreamed of dancing." The message was simple, but it made her smile despite herself. Before she could respond, another text appeared. "Look down." Sophia moved closer to the window, her breath catching as she spotted Ethan on the sidewalk below. He stood out from the morning crowd in his perfectly tailored charcoal suit, holding 2 cups from her favorite coffee shop. When he saw her at the window, he raised one in salute. His smile visible even from 40 stories up. Her office phone chirped. "Miss Wren." Her assistant's voice was tinged with amusement. "Mr. Carter is here with your morning coffee. Should I send him up?" Sophia touched her lips, remembering their kiss from the night before. Professional boundaries warred with the flutter in her chest. "Give me 5 minutes, then send him up." She used those minutes to steady herself, smoothing her burgundy pencil dress and checking her reflection in the window. The woman who looked back at her seemed different, somehow softer around the edges, her eyes holding a spark that hadn't been there yesterday morning. The knock on her door was confident, but not presumptuous. When she called, "Come in," Ethan entered with the same magnetic presence she remembered, but there was something new in his expression, a warmth that made her pulse quicken. "Double espresso with a splash of oat milk," he said, placing one of the cups on her desk. "And before you ask, yes, I had my assistant call your assistant to find out your coffee order. I believe in thorough research." Sophia accepted the coffee, careful to avoid letting their fingers touch. She wasn't sure she could maintain her composure if they did. Most CEOs send emails after failed acquisitions, not personal coffee delivery. Most CEOs haven't had their entire worldview rearranged by one evening with an extraordinary woman. Ethan's voice was soft but intense as he studied her face. "Did you sleep well?" "Not really," she admitted, taking a sip of the perfectly prepared coffee. "You?" Not a wink. His smile held no regret. "I kept thinking about that kiss." Heat bloomed in her cheeks, but she met his gaze steadily. "Ethan, about last night." "Don't." He took a step closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, the same scent that had haunted her dreams. "Don't tell me it was a one-time thing or that we should keep things professional. What happened at La Piccola Rosa wasn't just chemistry or the wine or the romantic setting. It was real, Sophia, and I think it scared you as much as it scared me." She sat down, her coffee kneading both hands free to maintain her balance in the face of his intensity. And why would the great Ethan Carter be scared? His laugh was soft and self-deprecating. "Because for the first time in my life, I'm not in control. Because every carefully laid plan, every strategic move I've ever made, seems meaningless compared to the way I feel when you look at me. Because I've built an empire on calculating risks, but there's nothing calculated about what's happening between us." Sophia's heart thundered in her chest as he moved closer still, near enough now that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. "And what exactly is happening between us?" Instead of answering, Ethan reached out slowly, giving her time to step away if she chose. When she remained still, his fingers traced the line of her jaw with exquisite gentleness. "Let me show you. Have dinner with me again tonight." "Ethan." She meant it to sound like a protest, but it came out more like a plea. "Not at a restaurant this time," he continued, his thumb brushing her lower lip in a way that made her breath hitch. "Let me cook for you. No pretenses, no interruptions, just us." The invitation hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility. Sophia knew she should refuse his own magical evening was one thing, but a second, in his home no less, would mean acknowledging that this was more than a momentary lapse in judgment. "I have a board meeting tonight," she said, but even to her own ears, it sounded like a weak excuse. "It ends at 7. I had my assistant check." His smile was both sheepish and unrepentant. "I told you, I believe in thorough research." A laugh escaped her despite herself. "You're impossible." "I prefer determined." His hand moved to cup her cheek, and Sophia found herself leaning into his touch. "Say yes, Sophia. Let me prove that last night was just the beginning." She should say no. She should step back, establish professional boundaries, protect the empire she'd worked so hard to build. But looking into Ethan's eyes, seeing the mixture of hope and vulnerability there, she found herself nodding. "Yes," she whispered, and was rewarded with a smile that could have lit up the Manhattan skyline. Ethan's thumb stroked her cheekbone once more before he reluctantly stepped back. "I'll send a car at 7:30. Wear something comfortable, no power suits allowed." As he turned to leave, Sophia called after him, "Ethan." When he looked back, she allowed herself a small smile. "Thank you for the coffee." His answering grin was boyish and charming. "Thank you for the second chance." After he left, Sophia sank into her chair, her heart racing. Through her window, she watched him emerge onto the street below, his stride confident but lighter somehow, as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. Just before he disappeared into the crowd, he looked up, and even from 40 stories away, she could feel the intensity of his gaze. The day passed in a blur of meetings and phone calls, but underneath her professional exterior, Sophia's mind kept drifting to the evening ahead. By 7:15, she had changed into a casual silk blouse and flowing palazzo pants, her hair loose around her shoulders in the way she'd noticed Ethan watching the night before. True to his word, a car waited for her at 7:30, but instead of the formal Bentley, she found a classic Aston Martin DB5 with Ethan himself behind the wheel. "I thought about sending Michael," he said as he opened the passenger door, "but I couldn't wait another minute to see you." The drive to his penthouse was filled with comfortable silence and stolen glances. Ethan drove with the same focused grace he brought to everything, but his free hand found hers across the console, their fingers intertwining naturally. His building in Tribeca was understated but exclusive. The kind of place that didn't need to advertise its luxury. The private elevator opened directly into his penthouse, and Sophia's breath caught at the view. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the city lights like a constellation brought to earth, while the space itself was warm and surprisingly intimate, all rich woods and comfortable textures, with none of the sterile modernism she'd expected. But what truly surprised her was the sound of jazz floating through the air and the unmistakable aroma of something delicious cooking. "You really cook?" she asked, watching as Ethan shed his suit jacket and rolled up his sleeves, revealing strong forearms that made her mouth go dry. "My mother's Italian," he answered, leading her to the kitchen where various pots simmered promisingly. "Cooking is in my DNA." "Wine?" She accepted a glass of Brunello and leaned against the counter, watching as he moved confidently around the kitchen. There was something incredibly attractive about seeing this powerful man so at ease in such a domestic setting. "Can I help?" His smile was warm as he handed her a cutting board and some fresh herbs. "Chop these for the salad." They worked together in comfortable synchronicity, moving around each other as if they'd done this 100 times before. Ethan told her stories about learning to cook at his grandmother's knee, while Sophia shared memories of Sunday dinners with her family. The formality of their business personas melted away, replaced by an easy intimacy that felt both new and somehow familiar. When dinner was ready, handmade pappardelle with wild mushrooms and a salad of baby greens, Ethan led her not to the formal dining room, but to a cozy nook near the windows. Candles flickered on the small table, and the city spread out below them like a carpet of stars. "This is incredible," Sophia said after her first bite, the flavors exploding on her tongue. "I'm starting to think you missed your calling as a chef." Ethan's laugh was rich and genuine. "Just wait until dessert. But first," he stood and offered his hand. "Dance with me." The jazz had shifted to something slower, more intimate. Sophia allowed him to pull her to her feet and into his arms, one hand settling at her waist while the other held hers over his heart. They swayed together in the candlelight, the city their only witness. "What are we doing, Ethan?" she whispered, her head resting against his shoulder. His hand traced patterns on her lower back as they moved to the music. "I believe it's called falling in love." Sophia's heart stuttered at his words. She pulled back enough to look into his eyes, finding nothing but sincere emotion there. "It's too fast." "Is it?" His hand moved to cup her cheek. "Or have we both just been waiting for something real without knowing it?" Before she could respond, his lips found hers, and all her carefully constructed arguments melted away. This kiss was different from their first, deeper, more certain, full of promise and possibility. Sophia wound her arms around his neck, pressing closer as Ethan's hands spanned her waist, lifting her slightly off her feet. When they finally parted, both breathing heavily, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "Stay," he whispered, "not for anything more than this. Just stay and watch the sunrise with me. Let me hold you and prove that what's happening between us is worth any risk." Sophia looked into his eyes, seeing past the powerful CEO to the man who cooked Italian food and danced in candlelight, the man who had somehow slipped past all her defenses to touch her heart. "Yes," she whispered back, and felt his smile against her lips as he kissed her again. The night stretched ahead of them, full of promise and possibility as the city sparkled below, and their hearts beat in perfect symphony. Chapter 5. The Wall. Dawn painted Manhattan in watercolor hues as Sophia and Ethan stood on his penthouse balcony, sharing the comfortable silence of a night that neither wanted to end. She was wrapped in his cashmere sweater, the soft material carrying his scent, while his arms encircled her from behind as they watched the sun rise over the city they both loved. They had spent hours talking, dancing, sharing pieces of themselves that they'd never revealed to anyone else. Ethan had played the piano for her Chopin's nocturnes, his fingers dancing over the keys with unexpected grace. Sophia had told him about her dreams of expanding Wren Financial into international waters, and he had listened with genuine interest, offering insight without trying to take control. But as the morning light grew stronger, reality began to seep back in. "I should go," Sophia murmured, though she made no move to leave his embrace. "I have a morning meeting with the board." Ethan's arms tightened slightly around her waist. "Cancel it," he suggested, pressing a kiss to the sensitive spot behind her ear. "Stay here with me. We can spend the day getting to know each other better." The temptation was strong, but it only served to highlight the dangers of their situation. Sophia turned in his arms, needing to see his face. "Ethan, what are we doing?" His blue eyes were soft with affection as he tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I thought that was obvious." "I'm falling in love with you, Sophia Wren." Her heart stuttered at his words, even as alarm bells rang in her mind. "It's been 2 days. 2 days that have changed everything." His hand cupped her cheek, thumb tracing her lower lip in a way that made her breath catch. "Tell me you don't feel it too." "What I feel doesn't matter," she said, though her body betrayed her by leaning into his touch. "We're competitors, Ethan. You tried to take over my company less than 48 hours ago, and you brilliantly defended it." He reminded her with a smile that held equal parts pride and admiration. "That's part of why I'm falling for you, your intelligence, your strength, your unwavering integrity." "Stop." Sophia stepped back, wrapping her arms around herself despite the warmth of his sweater. "This isn't a romance novel. In the real world, CEOs don't fall in love with their takeover targets." Ethan's expression grew serious as he studied her face. "Is that what you think this is? Some elaborate corporate strategy?" "Isn't it?" The words hurt to say, but she forced them out anyway. "The great Ethan Carter, known for getting whatever he wants by any means necessary. When the hostile takeover failed, you switched tactics. Wine and candlelight, intimate dinners and sunrise confessions. It's brilliant, really." Pain flashed across his features, quickly replaced by determination. "You don't believe that. Last night, when we danced, when we talked about our dreams, when I held you, you knew it was real. Did I?" Sophia moved toward the balcony door, needing physical distance to maintain her emotional walls. Or did I just want to believe that the most notorious corporate raider in Manhattan had suddenly developed a heart? Sophia. Her name on his lips was both a plea and a promise. He followed her into the penthouse, but didn't try to touch her. "Look at me. Really look at Minot, at the reputation or the corporate image. What do you see?" She did look at him then, this powerful man who had spent hours sharing his passion for classical music, who cooked Italian food with his grandmother's recipes, who looked at her like she was the answer to questions he hadn't known he was asking. "I see someone dangerous," she whispered. "Someone who could make me forget everything I've worked for. Or someone who could help you achieve even more." Ethan took a careful step closer, his hands raised as if approaching a spooked animal. "We're stronger together," Sophia note, "as corporate entities. But as people, what we have, this connection, it's rare, special. It's impossible." She moved to the piano, running her fingers over the keys where his had been hours before. "Do you know how hard I've worked to be taken seriously in this industry? As a woman? As a black woman? One hint of a relationship with you, and everything I've built will be questioned. Every decision, every success, they'll say I earned it on my back instead of my brain. Then we'll prove them wrong." The conviction in his voice made her look up. "Together. I'll sell my shares in Carter Enterprises if that's what it takes. Don't you, Dari?" Sophia's voice cracked with emotion. "Don't you dare offer to give up everything you've built for a fantasy that can never work." Ethan crossed the room in 3 long strides, and before she could retreat, his hands were cradling her face. "It's not a fantasy. What I feel for you is the most real thing I've ever known, more real than any business deal, any corporate victory. You've awakened something in me I didn't even know was sleeping." The intensity in his eyes made her heart race, but she forced herself to step back. "That's the problem, Ethan. You're thinking with your heart instead of your head. But I can't afford that luxury. I have responsibilities to my shareholders, to my employees, to every little girl who looks at me and sees what's possible. And what about your responsibility to yourself?" His voice was gentle but insistent. "To your own happiness?" Tears threatened, but Sophia blinked them back. "My happiness isn't more important than my legacy. They don't have to be mutually exclusive." Ethan reached for her hand, and it took every ounce of her willpower not to let him take it. "We can find a way, Sophia. Together?" "No." She took another step back, then another, moving toward the elevator. "We can't. Last night was beautiful, Ethan, magical, even, but it has to end here. Sophia, please." The pain in his voice nearly broke her resolve. "Don't walk away from this. From us." She pressed the elevator button, grateful when the doors opened immediately. "There is no us, Ethan. There can't be. I'm not a toy or a conquest or a challenge to be overcome. I'm a CEO who made the mistake of letting down her guard for one night. It won't happen again." The last thing she saw as the elevator doors closed was Ethan's face, a mixture of hurt, longing, and determination that would haunt her dreams for nights to come. In the privacy of the elevator, Sophia leaned against the wall and closed her eyes, fighting back tears. She was still wearing his sweater, the soft material carrying the scent that had become painfully familiar over the past 2 nights. With trembling fingers, she typed a message to her assistant. "Have my driver meet me at 180 Greenwich, with a change of clothes. Clear my morning schedule." The early morning sun was harsh as she emerged onto the street, making her wish for the softness of dawn on the balcony. A few early risers hurried past, paying no attention to the woman in evening clothes and a man's sweater who looked like her world was crumbling. 2 hours later, freshly showered and dressed in the armor of Chanel, Sophia sat in her office, reviewing quarterly reports. She had returned Ethan's sweater via courier, along with a note that read simply, "Thank you for the magic. Goodbye." Her assistant's voice crackled over the intercom. "Miss Wren. Mr. Carter is in the lobby. He's requested 5 minutes of your time." Sophia's hands clenched on her desk, her heart racing even as her voice remained steady. "Tell him I'm in meetings all day. And Nora, have security update the approved visitor list. Mr. Carter is no longer to be granted access without prior written authorization." "Yes, Miss Wren." Her assistant's voice held no judgment. But Sophia could hear the concern. "Should I also return the flowers?" "Flowers? 3 dozen white roses were just delivered. The card says, 'Some walls are meant to be broken. Don't give up on us.'" "And Sophia closed her eyes, fighting back a fresh wave of emotion. "Donate them to the Children's Hospital on 5th. And Nora, hold all my calls for the next hour." Once alone, Sophia moved to the window, the same window where she had spotted Ethan with coffee just yesterday morning. He was still there in the lobby, she knew, probably charming the security staff while he waited for her to change her mind. But she couldn't change her mind, couldn't risk everything she'd built for a man who made her feel like anything was possible. Love wasn't enough in the real world of corporate takeovers and shareholder expectations. So why did doing the right thing feel so devastatingly wrong? Chapter 6. The Pursuit. A week passed like a slow-motion dance of hearts. Each morning, Sophia found a single white rose on her desk, delivered before the building opened, with no card needed to identify the sender. She donated each one to the Children's Hospital, but not before holding it briefly, remembering the magic of those 2 nights. Ethan had respected her wishes, making no attempts to breach the walls she'd erected, but his presence lingered in subtle ways. The coffee cart outside her building now stocked her favorite oat milk. Anonymous donations appeared at her preferred charities. And somehow, every time she left her office, The street musician on the corner was playing Chopin. On the 8th morning, Sophia arrived early to find not a rose but a well-worn book of poetry on her desk, Pablo Neruda's Love Sonnets. The page was marked with a pressed jasmine flower, and one passage was underlined in familiar handwriting. I love you without knowing how, or when, or from where. I love you simply, without problems or pride. I love you in this way because I do not know any other way of loving. Her fingers trembled as she traced the words. During their night at his penthouse, they had discussed their shared love of poetry, and she had mentioned wanting to read Neruda in the original Spanish. The book was a first edition, with both Spanish and English translations. Nora, she called softly, knowing her assistant was already at her desk. How did this get here? The young woman appeared in her doorway, looking slightly uncomfortable. Mr. Carter's brother delivered it personally. Dr. Nathan Carter. He said it was a medical text he borrowed from you. Clever, Sophia thought. Using his brother, who was a doctor, would naturally be allowed into the building for the free clinic they operated on the ground floor. And you believe that? No, Miss Wren. Nora's voice held a hint of gentle reproach. But I believed in the way his hands shook when he handed it to me. The way he said his brother hasn't smiled in a week. Sophia's heart clenched. That will be all, Nora. Alone again, she opened her laptop to check the morning's financial reports. A new article caught her eye. Carter Enterprises announces major restructuring. The headline made her breath catch. But it was the details that made her hands tremble. Ethan had appointed a new CEO, a highly respected woman with a track record of ethical business practices. He would remain on the board but step back from day-to-day operations to focus on personal projects and philanthropic endeavors. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Coffee. The usual place. No pressure, no agenda, just two people who miss talking about poetry and music. Who? E. Sophia stared at the message until the screen went dark. She thought about those magical nights, the way he had looked at her in the candlelight, how safe she had felt in his arms, the vulnerability in his eyes when he played the piano for her. Before she could change her mind, she typed, "Why are you doing this, Ethan?" His response came immediately. Because some things are worth fighting for. Because every morning I wake up reaching for you. Because the world makes more sense when you're in it. Tears pricked at her eyes. I can't be what you want. You already are. You're strong and brilliant and afraid of the same things I am. Let me prove that we're stronger together than apart. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as her heart warred with her mind. Finally, she wrote, "The coffee shop. 1 hour. Just talking." She could almost hear his smile in his reply. Just talking. Though I reserve the right to look at you. Like you're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. The hour crawled by as Sophia tried to focus on work. She changed her outfit twice, settling on a casual cream sweater and tailored pants, professional but not intimidating. At precisely 10 o'clock, she stepped into the sunshine. The coffee shop was busy with the late morning crowd, but she spotted him immediately. Ethan sat at a corner table, 2 cups already waiting. He had dressed down as well, in a charcoal sweater that made his eyes look stormy. When he saw her, the smile that lit his face made her heart skip. "You came," he said softly as she approached. "I wasn't sure you would." Neither was I. She sat across from him, noticing how he had positioned the chairs so they could sit close without being overheard. "The article about Carter Enterprises. It had nothing to do with you," he finished, though they both knew it wasn't entirely true. "Elizabeth Kim is brilliant. She should have been CEO years ago, but I was too controlling to step back. And now..." His eyes held hers steadily. "Now I know there are more important things than control, like trust and courage and love. Ethan." She wrapped her hands around the coffee cup, needing something to ground her. "We talked about this." "No, you talked. I listened. Now it's my turn." He leaned forward, his voice low and intense. "You think a relationship between us would undermine everything you've built, but look at what's happened this week. Wren Financial stock is up 12% since the announcement of my stepping back. The market respects strong, independent leadership. It's not just about the market." "I know." His hand moved across the table, not quite touching hers but close enough that she could feel its warmth. It's about your legacy, about being a role model, about proving that success comes from merit, not connections. I understand that. Sophia, it's one of the countless things I admire about you. She took a shaky breath. Then you understand why this can't work. No, I understand why you're afraid. But fear isn't the same as impossibility. His fingers brushed hers briefly, sending electricity up her arm. What if we took it slow? No public appearances. No corporate entanglements, just two people getting to know each other, seeing where this connection leads. And if it leads nowhere? His smile was gentle but determined. Then at least we'll know we tried. But Sophia. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Read this first, please. She unfolded the paper to find a press release dated for the following week. Her eyes widened as she read. Carter Enterprises announces the creation of the Future Leaders Foundation, a $100 million initiative to support women and minorities in business leadership. The foundation would be independently operated by a board of respected industry leaders, with all funding irrevocably committed. It's not about you, Ethan said quietly. This has been in development for months. But meeting you, seeing your strength, your dedication to lifting others up it, made me realize it's time to stop talking about change and start making it happen. Tears threatened again as Sophia read the details. The foundation would provide mentorship, education, and seed funding for underrepresented entrepreneurs. It was exactly the kind of initiative she had dreamed of creating herself. Why are you showing me this? Because I want you to understand who I am beyond the corporate raider image. Because every time you talk about your grandmother's legacy, your eyes light up with passion for creating opportunity. Because he took a deep breath. Because I'm falling more in love with you every day, and I want you to know that the man who wants to be with you is someone worthy of your trust. Sophia looked into his eyes, seeing past the powerful CEO to the man who had spent a week finding quiet ways to show her his heart. I'm scared, she whispered. So am I. His honesty made her breath catch. I'm scared of losing you, scared of not being good enough, scared that my reputation will hurt you. But mostly, his voice softened. I'm scared of living the rest of my life wondering what might have been if we had been brave enough to try. A tear slipped down her cheek. Ethan reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed it away with his thumb. Have dinner with me, he murmured. Not at my penthouse or a restaurant. Come to my house in the Hamptons. Just us, the ocean, and honest conversation about what we both want. When? Tonight. Tomorrow. Whenever you're ready. His thumb traced her cheekbone before he reluctantly withdrew his hand. I'll wait as long as you need. Sophia thought about the roses, the book of poetry, the way he had respected her boundaries, while finding subtle ways to remind her of their connection. She thought about the foundation, about the changes he was making in his own life, about the vulnerability in his eyes when he admitted his fears. Tonight, she heard herself say, but just dinner and talking. The joy that lit his face made her heart flip. Just dinner and talking, he agreed, though I reserve the right to look at you like you're my whole world. As they finished their coffee, planning the logistics of their evening, Sophia felt something shift inside her chest. The walls she had built were still there. But maybe, just maybe, they needed a door. Love, she was beginning to realize, didn't have to mean weakness. Sometimes it meant finding the strength to be vulnerable, to trust, to believe in possibilities. And Ethan Carter was definitely a possibility worth exploring. Chapter 7. The Betrayal. The Hamptons estate sat perched on a cliff overlooking the Atlantic, its weathered shingles and pristine windows reflecting the golden light of sunset. Sophia stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of the great room, watching waves crash against the rocks below, while Ethan prepared dinner in the kitchen behind her. The domestic sounds of chopping and sizzling, mixed with the soft jazz playing from hidden speakers, created an atmosphere of intimacy that made her heart ache with possibility. Their evening had started perfectly. Ethan had picked her up in a vintage Porsche, the leather seat still carrying the warmth of the afternoon sun. The drive out of the city had been filled with comfortable conversation and shared glances, his hand finding hers across the console whenever the road allowed. Now, watching him move confidently around his kitchen sleeves rolled up, wine glass in hand as he stirred something that smelled divine. Sophia felt her walls continuing to crack. This version of Ethan, relaxed and unguarded in his home, was dangerously easy to fall for. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, and she almost ignored it. But years of corporate responsibility made her check the screen. The message from her CFO made her blood run cold. "Check your email now. WSJ. Breaking story in 10 minutes. Ethan must have noticed her sudden tension. "Everything okay?" "I need to check something," she said, already opening her email. The subject line from her CFO made her hands shake. Hostile takeover Carter Enterprises shell company. The attached documents painted a devastating picture. A shell company, traced back through layers of subsidiaries to Carter Enterprises, had been quietly acquiring Wren Financial stock through multiple smaller investment firms. They were just shy of a controlling interest. The room seemed to spin as Sophia read the details. The acquisition strategy had been initiated months ago, long before their first meeting. Every move had been carefully orchestrated, including the timing of the public takeover attempt. "It was meant to fail," she whispered, pieces falling into place. "Sophia?" Ethan's voice was closer now, concerned. "What's wrong?" She turned to face him, her heart shattering at the genuine worry in his eyes. Was any of it real? "What are you talking about?" Her phone buzzed again, this time with the Wall Street Journal notification. The headline screamed across her screen. "Carter Enterprises poised for hostile takeover of Wren Financial through shell company." This. She held up her phone, watching as the color drained from his face. The failed takeover attempt, the romantic pursuit, the stepping back from your company, it was all part of the plan, wasn't it? Make me let my guard down while your shell company acquired enough shares for control. "Sophia, no." Ethan stepped toward her, but she backed away. "I can explain." "Explain what?" "How you orchestrated the perfect con." The great Ethan Carter, known for getting whatever he wants by any means necessary. A bitter laugh escaped her. "I should have trusted my first instincts." "Listen to me," he pleaded, his voice raw. "Yes, the shell company strategy was put in place months ago, but everything that's happened between you's very moment, every feeling that's real, is it?" Tears threatened, but she refused to let them fall. Or was that part of the strategy too? Seduce the CEO while your company swallows hers whole? You know me better than that. He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. What we have is nothing but a beautifully executed business strategy." Sophia grabbed her purse from the counter, needing to escape before her composure cracked completely. "Congratulations, Mr. Carter. You've proven why you're considered the most ruthless CEO on Wall Street." "Sophia, please." Ethan moved to block her path to the door, his eyes desperate. "Let me call the board. Stop the acquisition. I'll sell my shares, dissolve the shell company, whatever it takes. Don't you see? It doesn't matter what you do now. The damage is done." She forced herself to meet his gaze, even as her heart broke at the pain she saw there. Every touch, every kiss, every intimate moment we shared it, was all built on lies. "No." His voice cracked on the word. "The acquisition plan was business, but falling in love with you, that was the most real thing that's ever happened to me." For a moment, looking into his eyes, Sophia almost believed him, but then her phone buzzed again with another news alert. Sources reveal Carter's personal involvement in orchestrating Wren Financial takeover. "I have to go." She stepped around him, grateful when he didn't try to stop her. "My board will be meeting in emergency session. I need to try to save what's left of my company and my reputation. Let me drive you." "I've already called a car." She was proud of how steady her voice remained. "Goodbye, Ethan." The drive back to Manhattan passed in a blur of tears and phone calls. Her legal team was already strategizing defenses, but the outlook was grim. The shell company had acquired shares legally, and with the next block of shares set to be purchased at Monday's opening bell, Wren Financial would effectively belong to Carter Enterprises. Dawn was breaking over the city when Sophia finally reached her apartment. She had spent the night in emergency meetings, watching her life's work slip through her fingers. Her phone had dozens of missed calls from Ethan and a single text that made fresh tears fall. "I know you won't believe me now, but I love you. The acquisition was business, but you You're everything. Please let me prove it." She deleted the message without responding. Hours later, sitting in her office surrounded by lawyers and PR teams, Sophia received a hand-delivered envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, Ethan's resignation letter from the Carter Enterprises board, effective immediately, along with a note in his familiar handwriting. "Some things are worth more than empire building. I'm selling my shares in both companies, not because it will fix what I've broken, but because you deserve to know that my heart belongs to you, not to corporate strategy. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to earn back your trust, even if you never give me the chance. The man who fell in love with you over poetry and piano music, that's the real me. The corporate raider who hurt you, that's who I used to be before you showed me what really matters. I love you, Sophia Wren. That's the only truth that matters now. Ethan." Sophia placed the letter in her desk drawer next to the book of Neruda's poetry she couldn't bring herself to return. Then she straightened her shoulders, dried her tears, and prepared to fight for her company's survival. Some battles, she was learning, had to be fought with a broken heart. As she stared out at the Manhattan skyline, Sophia wondered if there was any way back from betrayal this deep. Could love survive when trust was shattered? Could her heart ever forget the way it felt to dance with Ethan in candlelight, to share dreams over midnight conversations, to believe in the possibility of having both love and success? The sun set over the city, painting the sky in shades of heartbreak as Sophia Wren faced the hardest truth of all. Sometimes the greatest betrayals come wrapped in the sweetest lies, and the hardest person to forgive is the one who made you believe in fairy tales. But as she touched the spine of the poetry book in her drawer, she couldn't help but wonder if, somewhere beneath the betrayal, lay a truth worth fighting for. If the man who had waited in rain and sent her roses, who had played Chopin and quoted Neruda, was real enough to rise from the ashes of corporate warfare, only time would tell. For now, she had a company to save and a heart to protect. The night settled over Manhattan like a heavy curtain, full of questions without answers and dreams turned to dust. But somewhere in the city, a piano played Chopin into the darkness, and a man who had lost everything that mattered wrote resignation letters and planned redemption. Some love stories, after all, are worth fighting for, even when the fight seems impossible to win. Chapter 8. The Truth. The morning headlines hit like thunderbolts across Manhattan's financial district. Carter Enterprises CEO Ethan Carter sells controlling interest. Billionaire Ethan Carter divests from shell companies. Carter steps down. Some things are worth more than money. Sophia stood at her office window, the newspapers spread across her desk behind her. For a week, she had weathered the storm of the attempted takeover, fighting with everything she had to maintain control of Wren Financial. Now, as dawn painted the city in shades of possibility, she tried to understand the magnitude of what Ethan had done. Her phone buzzed with a text from her CFO. He sold everything, not just the shell company shares, all of his holdings, at below market value, to a consortium of women-owned investment firms. Another message followed quickly. Wren Financial stock up 30% on opening. The market loves the new ownership structure. Sophia's hands trembled as she read the full story. Ethan hadn't just sold his shares. He had orchestrated a complete transformation of both companies' ownership structures. Carter Enterprises and all its subsidiaries were now majority owned by a diverse group of investors with binding commitments to maintain ethical business practices. The elevator dinged behind her, and she knew without turning who it would be. Only one person had the authority to override her security protocols. "Your brother's security clearance," she said quietly, still facing the window. "That's how you got up here." Nathan agreed to help on one condition. Ethan's voice was rough with emotion. "That I tell you the whole truth, no matter how much it hurts." Finally, Sophia turned. Ethan stood in her office doorway, looking nothing like the polished CEO she had first met. His suit was rumpled, his hair disheveled, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion, but it was the raw vulnerability in his expression that made her heart clench. "The truth," she gestured to the newspapers. "Isn't it all here in black and white?" "No." He took a step forward, then stopped when she tensed. "The truth is that I fell in love with you the moment you walked into that boardroom and challenged everything I thought I knew about success. The acquisition plan was already in motion, had been for months, but the moment I saw you, He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. Everything changed. Pretty words from a man who built an empire on manipulation. Yes. His acceptance of the accusation surprised her. I was that manth corporate raider who saw people as pieces on a chessboard. But you, his voice softened. You made me want to be better. Every moment we spent together was real. Sophia, every conversation, every touch, every dream we shared. And the shell company? The staged failed takeover? She held up the folder with the damning documents, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. I tried to stop it. He pulled a folder from his briefcase and placed it on her desk. Here are the board minutes from the emergency meeting I called the morning after our first dinner. I moved to terminate the acquisition strategy. They voted me down. Sophia opened the folder with trembling fingers. The documents confirmed his story, including his threatened resignation, which the board had rejected. Why didn't you tell me? Because I was a coward. Ethan's honesty was brutal. I thought I could find a way to protect both you and the company I'd built. I thought if I stepped back, appointed Elizabeth as CEO, the board would follow my lead, but I underestimated their determination to complete the acquisition. He took another step closer, and this time Sophia didn't back away. When I saw that headline break during our dinner, I knew I had lost the only thing that really mattered: your trust. So you sold everything. It wasn't a question, but Ethan answered anyway. I sold everything because none of it means anything without you. Because the man I want to be, man you made me want to be, doesn't need an empire. He just needs a chance to prove that his love is real. Tears threatened as Sophia looked at the man before her, the billionaire who had given up everything to prove his heart was true. You could have fought the board, maintained control. I could have. He moved closer still, close enough that she could see the tears in his own eyes. But every second I spent fighting them was another second you believed I had betrayed you. And that was more painful than losing everything I'd built. Ethan. Her voice broke on his name. I love you, Sophia Wren. He reached for her hand, and this time she let him take it. I love your brilliant mind and your determined spirit. I love how you fight for what you believe in and never compromise your integrity. I love that you made me want to be worthy of you. His thumb traced patterns on her palm, sending shivers up her arm. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but please, let me spend the rest of my life trying to earn it. Sophia looked into his eyes, seeing past the powerful CEO to the man who had bared his soul in journal pages, in piano music. You hurt me, she whispered. I know. His voice cracked. And I will regret that until my dying day. But Sophia, he raised their joined hands to his heart. What we have is real. The poetry and the piano music, the sunrise conversations and midnight dances, that's who we really are. The corporate games, the acquisitions, that was who I used to be before you showed me what really matters. She could feel his heart racing beneath their joined hands. And who are you now? Just a man in love with an extraordinary woman. A man who wants to build something real, something based on trust and respect instead of power plays and hostile takeovers. His free hand came up to cup her cheek. A man who hopes it's not too late to prove that love is stronger than betrayal. Sophia leaned into his touch despite herself. It won't be easy, she warned. Trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild. I know. His thumb brushed away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. But I'm willing to wait, to work, to prove myself worthy of your trust again. She studied his face, seeing the sincerity in his eyes, the hope and fear warring in his expression. Why, she whispered, why give up everything? Because you taught me that true wealth isn't measured in stock prices or corporate acquisitions. It's measured in the beat of a heart that knows love. He smiled softly. Besides, I haven't given up everything, just the things that don't matter. And what matters? You. The word was both a prayer and a promise. Us. The possibility of building something real, together, something based on trust and love instead of corporate strategy. Sophia felt something shift in her chest, a wall crumbling, a heart beginning to hope. She took a deep breath. If we try this again, we do it right. Complete transparency. No more secrets. Ethan's smile could have lit up the Manhattan skyline. Complete transparency, he agreed. Starting now. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small notebook. This is my personal journal from the past month. Every thought, every feeling, every moment of falling in love with you, and realizing I had to choose between being the man you deserve and being the corporate raider I used to be. She took the journal with trembling hands. "You're trusting me with this?" "I'm trusting you with everything." He stepped back, giving her space. "Read it. Take all the time you need. And when you're ready, if you're ready, I'll be waiting." As he turned to leave, Sophia called after him, "Ethan." He paused in the doorway, hope lighting his eyes. "Have dinner with me tonight," she said softly, "at La Piccola Rosa. Just two people getting to know each other again, with no corporate warfare between us." The joy that transformed his face made her heart skip. "I'll have Mama Rosa set our table for 8. After he left, Sophia sank into her chair, holding his journal against her heart. Outside her window, Manhattan sparkled in the morning sun, full of new possibilities. She opened the journal to the first page, where Ethan's elegant handwriting filled the paper. "Today, I met a woman who made me question everything. Her name is Sophia Wren, and I think she just changed my life. Sometimes, she was beginning to realize, the greatest truth comes after the deepest betrayal. And sometimes, love is strong enough to build something new from the ashes of what was lost." She had a feeling their story was just beginning. Chapter 9. The Choice. La Piccola Rosa glowed with warmth as Sophia approached, her heels clicking softly on the familiar cobblestones. She had spent the afternoon reading Ethan's journal, each page revealing layers of truth that had made her heart ache with understanding. Now, standing before the restaurant where their story had truly begun, she felt the weight of choice pressing down on her shoulders. Mama Rosa opened the door before she could reach for it, enveloping her in a maternal embrace that smelled of basil and wisdom. "Ah, Bella," the older woman said softly. "Sometimes the heart knows what the mind fears to accept." "Is he here?" Sophia asked, though she already knew the answer. She could feel Ethan's presence like a magnetic pull. "In your special alcove," Mama Rosa confirmed, her eyes twinkling. "He has been here since sunset, playing that old piano and looking like a man who has found his soul's purpose." The sounds of Chopin floated through the air as Sophia followed Mama Rosa through the restaurant. She recognized the Peace Nocturne in E-flat major, same one Ethan had played for her that night in his penthouse. But there was something different about it now, a vulnerability in the interpretation that made her breath catch. Ethan sat at the small piano in the corner, his back to her as his fingers danced over the keys. He had shed his suit jacket, his shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms that moved with graceful precision. The tension in his shoulders told her he knew she was there, but he finished the piece before turning to face her. "You came," he said softly, his eyes drinking her in like a man dying of thirst. "I read your journal." Sophia moved closer, drawn by the raw emotion in his gaze. "Every page." Ethan's hands clenched on his thighs. "And? I understand now." She sat beside him on the piano bench, close enough to feel his warmth but not quite touching. "The man who started that acquisition strategy isn't the same man who wrote those pages, isn't the same man who gave up an empire to prove his love was real." "No," he agreed, his voice rough with emotion. "That man died the moment he saw you walk into that boardroom. It just took him a while to accept it." Sophia touched one of the piano keys gently, the note hanging in the air between them. "You wrote about that moment, about how you felt your world shift on its axis." It did. Ethan's hand moved to cover hers on the keys, sending electricity up her arm. "Everything I thought I knew about success, about what mattered in life, it all changed when I met you. But I was too afraid to admit it at first." "Afraid of what?" "Of feeling this much. Of being vulnerable. Of letting go of the control I thought I needed." His thumb traced patterns on her wrist. "Of loving someone more than I loved power." Sophia turned her hand in his, their fingers intertwining naturally. "The journal entries after our first dinner, the way you described fighting with your board, trying to stop the acquisition. I should have told you everything then." Self-recrimination filled his voice. "Should have trusted that you were strong enough to handle the truth. Maybe," she squeezed his hand gently, "or maybe we both needed to go through this to understand what really matters." Ethan's free hand came up to cup her cheek, turning her face toward his. "And what matters to you, Sophia?" She looked into his eyes, seeing past the powerful CEO to the man who had bared his soul in journal pages, in piano music. Truth, trust, the courage to be vulnerable. Her voice softened. Love. I love you, he whispered, the words carrying the weight of absolute truth. More than empire building, more than corporate victories, more than anything I've ever known. Show me. Sophia challenged softly. Ethan's hands moved to the piano keys, and the opening notes of Debussy's Clair de Lune filled the air. But this time, he began to sing softly, his rich baritone giving words to the melody. I've built walls of steel and glass, thinking power was all that would last. But your love showed me what I couldn't see, that true wealth lies in vulnerability. Tears pricked at Sophia's eyes as she recognized the lyrics from his journal, a poem he had written during those sleepless nights after their separation. As the music swelled, Ethan continued, I'd trade every victory, every golden crown, just to build something real with you now. Trust me once more. Let me prove that my heart beats only to love you. The final notes faded into silence, but Ethan's eyes remained locked with hers, laying his soul bare, in a way no corporate titan ever would. I wrote that the night I decided to sell everything, he said softly, sitting at my piano, realizing that all the success in the world meant nothing if I couldn't share it with you. Sophia raised a hand to trace the line of his jaw, feeling the slight tremor that ran through him at her touch. You really gave up everything. No. His hand covered hers against his cheek. I gave up the things that were keeping me from everything that matters. There's a difference. And what matters now? Building something real with you, not empires of glass and steel, but a foundation of trust and love. His other hand found her waist, drawing her closer on the piano bench. If you'll give me the chance. Sophia studied his face, seeing the truth written in every line. No more secrets. Complete transparency. He promised, in business and in love. No more corporate games. A smile touched his lips. The only game I want to play is seeing how many ways I can make you smile each day. And if I say we need to take it slow, then I'll court you properly. His voice held absolute conviction. I'll prove my love every day, in small ways and large, until you trust not just my words but my heart. Sophia felt the last of her walls crumbling as she looked into his eyes. I do trust your heart, she whispered. That's what scares me most. Then let me show you that your trust isn't misplaced. Ethan's thumb brushed her lower lip. Let me spend the rest of my life proving that love is stronger than fear. Instead of answering with words, Sophia closed the distance between them, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that tasted of truth and new beginnings. Ethan's arms wrapped around her, pulling her closer as the kiss deepened into something that spoke of second chances and hearts finding their way home. When they finally parted, both breathing heavily, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. Is that a yes? He murmured. It's a convince me, Sophia replied with a small smile. Show me this new man you've become. Show me that love really can build something stronger than corporate empires. Challenge accepted. Ethan pressed a soft kiss to her temple. Starting now. He turned back to the piano, his fingers finding the keys once more. This is something I've been working on, a piece that tells our story, from that first meeting to this moment of new beginnings. As the music began to flow, weaving together themes of challenge and surrender, passion and trust, Sophia felt her heart expanding with possibility. She leaned against Ethan's shoulder, watching his hands create beauty from ivory and emotion, and knew she had made the right choice. Sometimes, love requires a leap of faith. Sometimes, the greatest victories come not from conquering empires, but from surrendering to the truth in your heart. And sometimes, when you're brave enough to choose love over fear, you find that what you're building is stronger than anything that came before. The music swelled around them, filling the restaurant with promises of tomorrow as two hearts that had been meant for each other finally found their way to the truth. Chapter 10. The Storm. The headline exploded across every major financial news outlet on a quiet Tuesday morning. Leaked intimate photos of Wren, financial CEO, and former rival Ethan Carter. Sophia's hands trembled as she looked at the images splashed across her tablet screen. They were from their first night at the Metropolitan Museum gala, stolen moments, captured by someone with access to the security feeds. Her and Ethan dancing, his hand at the small of her back, their faces close together as they shared secrets over champagne, the way they looked at each other, the chemistry undeniable even in grainy security footage. The accompanying article was brutal, questioning whether their relationship had influenced business decisions, suggesting impropriety in the timing of Ethan's divestment from Carter Enterprises. The comments section was worse, filled with insinuations about how a black woman had risen to power in corporate America. Her office door burst open as Nora rushed in. "Miss Wren, the board is demanding an emergency meeting. The PR team has already received calls from every major network and—" "Get me Ethan," Sophia interrupted, her voice steady despite the chaos erupting around her. "Now." She didn't have to wait long. Within minutes, the elevator doors opened, and Ethan strode in, his face a mask of controlled fury. He had clearly come straight from his morning run, wearing track pants and a fitted athletic shirt, his hair still damp with sweat, but his presence filled the room with the same power it had when he wore $5,000 suits. "I've already got my legal team tracking the source," he said without preamble, moving to her side. "And the Met's security director is a personal friend. We'll find who did this." Sophia looked up at him, seeing the mix of rage and concern in his eyes. "The board meeting, cancel it." Ethan's voice was firm. "We do this together, on our terms. No more letting others control our narrative." "Ethan." "No." He knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "I know that look, Sophia. You're thinking about damage control, about protecting Wren Financial's reputation. But I won't let you sacrifice us to appease small-minded people who can't understand what we have." She touched his cheek, feeling the tension in his jaw. "The comments, the implications, are beneath you." His eyes blazed with intensity. "You built Wren Financial through brilliance and determination. Anyone who suggests otherwise isn't worth your time. But the shareholders will see exactly what we show them." Ethan stood, pulling her up with him. "Trust me." The question held echoes of their past, of trust broken and rebuilt. Sophia looked into his eyes and saw nothing but love and determination. "Yes. Then let's face this together." He pulled out his phone, fingers flying over the screen. "Nora, call a press conference. 1 hour, in the Wren Financial lobby. And get me a suit from my office." Sophia raised an eyebrow. "You keep suits in your office?" His smile was both sheepish and charming. "I might have started keeping a few things here just in case." The hour passed in a whirlwind of preparation. By the time they descended to the lobby, both were immaculately dressed. Sophia in a powerful red sheath dress, Ethan in a perfectly tailored gray suit. The space was packed with reporters and cameras, all hungry for scandal. But before they could face the media, Ethan pulled Sophia into a quiet corner. "Whatever happens out there," he said softly, "remember this, I love you. Not in secret, not with shame, but proudly and completely. Let them see that truth." Tears threatened, but Sophia blinked them back. "I love you too." Ethan's smile could have lit up Manhattan. "Then let's show them what real power looks like. Two people strong enough to choose love over appearances." They stepped to the podium together, Ethan's hand warm and steady at the small of her back. The cameras exploded with flashes, questions being shouted from every direction. But when Ethan spoke, his voice commanded silence. "Yes, the photos are real." His voice carried authority and pride. "They show me falling in love with the most extraordinary woman I've ever met, a brilliant CEO who outmaneuvered me in the boardroom, and then showed me that true success isn't measured in corporate acquisitions, but in the courage to be vulnerable." He turned to look at Sophia, his eyes soft with emotion. "I'm proud that these photos exist, proud that they capture the moment I realized what really matters in life. Proud to stand here beside the woman who made me want to be better." Sophia stepped forward, her voice clear and strong. "The timing of these leaked photos is clearly meant to suggest impropriety. So let me be clear. Every business decision made by both Wren Financial and Carter Enterprises has been thoroughly documented and approved by our respective boards. The only thing these photos prove is that sometimes love arrives in unexpected places." A reporter shouted, "But the timing of Mr. Carter's divestment was a choice made from love?" Ethan interrupted. "I chose to sell my shares and step down from Carter Enterprises because I wanted to build something real with Sophia Something, based on trust and respect, not corporate power plays. Another voice called out, "Miss Wren, how do you respond to suggestions that I somehow manipulated one of the most powerful CEOs in Manhattan?" Sophia's voice held steel beneath its smoothness. "I earned my position through hard work and merit. The fact that I also found love doesn't diminish my achievements, it enhances them. Because a truly strong woman doesn't have to choose between success and love." Ethan's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining naturally. "The person who leaked these photos thought they would shame us," he said, his thumb stroking her knuckles. "Instead, they've given us the opportunity to show that love is nothing to hide, that two powerful people can choose to be vulnerable together, that real strength lies not in corporate warfare but in the courage to let someone into your heart." The questions continued, but Ethan and Sophia answered them together, their united front and obvious devotion transforming what was meant to be a scandal into something inspiring. By the time they left the podium, social media was ablaze with support, their love story capturing hearts across the globe. Later that evening, in the sanctuary of Ethan's penthouse, they stood on the balcony, watching the sun set over their city. Ethan's arms wrapped around Sophia from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. "You were magnificent today," he murmured, pressing a kiss to her neck. "We were magnificent," she corrected, leaning back against his chest. "I never thought I'd say this, but I'm glad those photos leaked." "Oh?" His lips curved against her skin. "They forced us to be public about our relationship. No more hiding, no more worrying about appearances." She turned in his arms to face him. "Now everyone knows exactly what we mean to each other." Ethan's hand came up to cup her cheek. "And what do I mean to you, Sophia Wren?" She smiled, remembering their journey from that first boardroom meeting to this moment. "Everything," she whispered. "You mean everything?" His kiss tasted of triumph and tenderness, of battles won and love proven true. As the last rays of sunlight painted Manhattan in gold, two hearts that had found their way through storm and scandal beat as one, stronger for having faced the world together. Sometimes, the greatest victories come not from defeating enemies, but from standing proudly in your truth. Sometimes, love isn't just about private moments, but about showing the world that real power lies in the courage to be vulnerable. And sometimes, when the storm comes, you find that weathering it together only makes your love stronger. Chapter 11. The Resolution. The boardroom of Wren Financial hummed with anticipation as Sophia stood at the head of the table, her presence commanding attention without demanding it. The morning sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, catching the diamond on her left hand, Ethan's grandmother's ring, given to her last night in a moment of quiet perfection at La Piccola Rosa. "Ladies and gentlemen of the board," she began, her voice clear and strong. "I've called this meeting to propose something unprecedented in corporate history." The doors opened, and Ethan entered, carrying himself with the quiet confidence of a man who had found his true purpose. Gone was the corporate raider who had once tried to take over her company. In his place stood a partner, an equal, a man whose love had helped her dream bigger than she ever had before. 2 months ago, Sophia continued, when photos of our relationship leaked, many questioned whether love and business could coexist. Today, we're here to prove that they don't just coexist, they can create something revolutionary. Ethan moved to stand beside her, their shoulders barely touching but their energy perfectly aligned. "What we're proposing," he added, "is a new model of corporate leadership, not a merger in the traditional sense, but a partnership that will transform both our companies and the industry itself." The presentation that followed was unlike anything Wall Street had ever seen. Slides showed plans for the Future Leaders Initiative, a joint venture that would identify and support underrepresented entrepreneurs. Charts demonstrated how combining Wren Financial's ethical investment strategies with Ethan's tech innovation expertise could create sustainable growth while promoting diversity. "This isn't just about business," Sophia explained, her passion evident in every word. "It's about creating lasting change, about proving that success doesn't require sacrificing integrity, and about showing that love can be the foundation for something powerful," Ethan added, his hand finding hers on the presentation remote. "When I first met Sophia, I thought corporate success meant hostile takeovers and power plays. She showed me a better way. The board members exchanged glances as the scope of the proposal became clear. This wasn't just a business plan, it was a revolution in corporate culture, sparked by a love story that had captured the public's imagination. The media attention from our relationship, Sophia continued, has already brought unprecedented focus to issues of diversity in corporate leadership. We want to use that platform to create real change. She clicked to the next slide, showing the structure of their proposed partnership. Wren Financial would maintain its independence while collaborating with Ethan's new venture capital firm, focusing on innovative startups led by women and minorities. Together, Ethan explained, we'll create opportunities for those who have traditionally been excluded from corporate success, not through tokenism or quotas, but by recognizing and supporting genuine talent. The presentation continued, but something extraordinary was happening in that boardroom. As Sophia and Ethan traded off explaining different aspects of their vision, their natural synchronicity became apparent. They finished each other's sentences, anticipated each other's points, their passion and commitment, creating an energy that was impossible to resist. This is more than a business proposal, Sophia said, her voice softening as she looked at Ethan. It's proof that when you find the right partner in business and in life, anything is possible. Ethan's smile held all the love in the world as he took over. We're not asking for permission to change the world. We're inviting you to be part of something historic. When they finished, the silence in the boardroom was profound. Then, slowly, one of the oldest board members, a woman who had mentored Sophia's grandmother, began to applaud. Others joined in, until the room filled with the sound of approval and possibility. The vote was unanimous. Later that evening, as they celebrated on Ethan's penthouse balcony, the city lights twinkled below like earthbound stars. Sophia leaned back against Ethan's chest, his arms wrapped around her waist as they savored their victory. I wish my grandmother could see this, she murmured, touching the vintage ring that now graced her finger. She always said, true success comes from lifting others as you climb. She can see it. Ethan pressed a kiss to her temple. Through you, through every life, we'll change together. Sophia turned in his arms, reaching up to trace the lines of his face, the face that had become her home. Did you ever imagine, that first day in the boardroom, that we'd end up here? His laugh was soft and warm. I knew you would change my life. I just didn't know how completely. His hand came up to cup her cheek. You made me want to be better, Sophia, not just as a businessman, but as a human being. We made each other better, she corrected, leaning into his touch. That's what real partnership is about. The sound of the elevator announced the arrival of their guests. Soon, the penthouse filled with the people who had been part of their journey. Mama Rosa, bringing her famous tiramisu, Nathan and his wife, Elizabeth, key members of both their teams who had helped shape their vision. As Ethan played the piano, his music floating through the evening air, Sophia watched their chosen family celebrate together, the women from the board chatting with young entrepreneurs they were mentoring, corporate lawyers discussing social justice with community organizers, worlds merging, barriers breaking. All because two people had been brave enough to choose love over convention. Dance with me, Ethan said suddenly, appearing at her side and offering his hand. The piano now played a recorded version of the piece he had composed for her, their love story, in musical form. As they swayed together under the stars, Sophia remembered their first dance at the Met, how far they had come from those uncertain beginnings. You know, she said softly, when those photos leaked, I was terrified it would destroy everything I'd built. And now? Now I understand that love doesn't diminish. Success, it amplifies it. She smiled up at him. You taught me that it's possible to have both. Ethan's arms tightened around her. You taught me what real success looks like, that all the corporate victories in the world mean nothing without someone to share them with. Their guests had fallen silent, watching them dance with knowing smiles, these two powerful people who had found something more precious than power, more valuable than corporate empires. I love you, Ethan murmured, his forehead resting against hers, more than I ever thought possible. Show me. Sophia challenged with a smile, echoing words from their past. His kiss was gentle but full of promise, a preview of all the tomorrows they would share. When they parted, their guests burst into applause and cheers, celebrating not just their love, but what it represented: the possibility of change, the power of choosing heart over ambition. Later, after their guests had gone and the city had quieted, they stood again on the balcony. Ethan wrapped his grandmother's shawl around Sophia's shoulders, protecting her from the cool night air. "Ready to change the world?" he asked, pressing a kiss to her neck. Sophia leaned back against him, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "With you, I'm ready for anything." The ring on her finger caught the starlight, a symbol not just of their love but of the legacy they would build together. Two hearts that had found their way through corporate warfare and public scandal to something real, something lasting. Sometimes, the greatest adventures begin with a single choice, the choice to be vulnerable, to trust, to love. Sometimes, the most powerful partnerships grow not from business strategy but from hearts brave enough to choose each other. And sometimes, when you find the right person, you discover that success isn't measured in stock prices or corporate acquisitions, but in the difference you make together. As the night wrapped around them like a velvet cloak, Sophia and Ethan held each other close, their hearts beating in perfect sync. Tomorrow, they would begin their mission to change the corporate world. But tonight was for them two souls who had found in each other something more precious than any empire. Love, they had learned, was the greatest merger of all. Chapter 12. The Promise. Snow fell softly over Washington Square Park, transforming Manhattan into a winter wonderland. 1 year had passed since that first fateful meeting in the boardroom, 1 year since a corporate takeover attempt had unexpectedly led to love. Now, as evening descended, tiny lights twinkled in every tree, creating a magical canopy over the park's iconic arch. Sophia stood beneath that arch, snowflakes catching in her hair like diamond stars. Ethan had asked her to meet him here, saying only that he wanted to recreate their first walk together, but something in his voice, a mixture of nervousness and joy she'd never heard before, told her this night would be different. The sound of a piano drifted through the cold air, their song, the piece Ethan had composed for her, being played by a string quartet she couldn't yet see. Then, through the curtain of gently falling snow, she saw him approaching. Ethan moved toward her with purpose, his black coat dusted with white, his eyes fixed on her as if she were the only person in the world. In his hand, he carried a single white rose, like the ones he had left on her desk each morning during their separation, a symbol of pure love and new beginnings. "You look like a snow queen," he said softly when he reached her, offering the rose, "more beautiful than any dream." Sophia accepted the flower, her heart racing at the intensity in his gaze. "Ethan, what is all this?" Instead of answering, he took her free hand and led her to the center of the park. As they walked, lights began to illuminate the path, hundreds of paper lanterns creating a warm glow in the winter evening. The music grew stronger, and Sophia gasped as she saw what waited ahead. A circle of light had been created by dozens of antique brass lanterns, their flames protected from the snow by glass chimneys. In the center stood the quartet, playing on despite the weather, their music weaving magic through the night air. Around them, rose petals lay scattered on the snow, creating a carpet of crimson against white. But what brought tears to Sophia's eyes were the photographs, enlarged and illuminated, floating like memories in the night. Their first dance at the Met, their dinner at La Piccola Rosa, the press conference where they had faced scandal together, moments from their journey, captured and transformed into art. 1 year ago, Ethan began, his voice carrying emotion that made her heart tremble. "I thought I knew what success looked like. I had built an empire of glass and steel, thinking that was all that mattered." He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Then you walked into my life and showed me what real wealth looks like." Sophia felt tears freezing on her cheeks as Ethan continued, his thumbs tracing patterns on her palms. "You challenged everything I thought I knew about power, showed me that true strength lies not in corporate takeovers but in the courage to be vulnerable, taught me that real success isn't measured in stock prices, but in the lives we touch and the love we share." He released one of her hands to reach into his coat pocket, withdrawing not a ring box she already wore, his grandmother's ring, but a small leather-bound book. "This is my journal from this past year," he said softly. "Every page is filled with moments that made me fall more in love with you, the way you light up when talking about helping young entrepreneurs, how you dance in the kitchen when you think no one's watching, the sound of your laugh when I play piano badly on purpose." Sophia laughed through her tears, remembering all those precious moments. "But there's one empty page left," Ethan continued, his voice growing husky with emotion, "and I want to fill it with a promise." Then, in the falling snow, beneath twinkling lights, Ethan Carter, the man who had once ruled Wall Street with an iron fist, dropped to one knee before her. "Sophia Wren," he said, looking up at her with eyes full of love and certainty, "you walked into my boardroom, prepared for corporate warfare, and instead started a revolution in my heart. You made me want to be better, to dream bigger, to love deeper than I ever thought possible." He opened the journal to the last page, where a single question was written in his elegant hand. "Will you marry me? Not just for today or tomorrow, but for every moment of forever." "I know we're already engaged," he continued, smiling at the ring that graced her finger. "But I wanted to do this properly. To create a moment as magical as you are, to promise you in front of the whole world that my heart will always be your home." The quartet began playing their song again, its notes dancing with the snowflakes in the winter air around them. The city seemed to hold its breath, waiting for her answer. Sophia reached down to touch his face, her fingers tracing the features that had become more precious to her than any success. "You rewrote my story," she whispered. "Showed me that I didn't have to choose between love and legacy. Is that a yes?" Ethan's voice held hope and joy, and just a touch of his old playful arrogance. Instead of answering immediately, Sophia pulled him to his feet and took the pen he offered. With steady hands, she wrote beneath his question, "Yes, for every heartbeat of forever. Yes, through every storm and sunshine. Yes, to building dreams and changing worlds together. Yes, my love, always, yes." Ethan's smile could have melted all the snow in Manhattan as he pulled her into his arms. Their kiss was gentle at first, then deepened into something that spoke of passion and promise, of futures bright with possibility. When they finally parted, breathless and glowing, the park had filled with people, their friends and family emerging from the shadows to celebrate with them. Mama Rosa appeared with champagne and tears of joy. Nathan hugged his brother while Elizabeth embraced Sophia. Their corporate teams who had become family cheered and threw rose petals as music filled the night and love filled their hearts. Ethan held Sophia close, dancing with her in the falling snow. "Happy?" he murmured against her temple. "Beyond words," she replied, then smiled up at him. "Though I do have one question." "Anything." "That first night, when you promised it would only be one night." She traced the line of his jaw with gentle fingers. "Did you know, even then, that you were lying?" Ethan's laugh was rich and warm. "I think my heart knew what my head hadn't figured out yet, that one night with you would never be enough, that I'd want every night, every morning, every moment for the rest of our lives." "Smooth talker," Sophia teased, but her eyes shone with love. "Only with you," he promised, then kissed her again as snow fell like stardust around them. Later that night, in the warmth of their penthouse, they stood on their balcony, watching the city sparkle below. Ethan played with Sophia's fingers, touching the rings that symbolized their past and future. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "when I first saw you in that boardroom, I thought I was seeing my greatest business challenge. And instead, I was seeing my greatest blessing." He turned her in his arms to face him. "The woman who would teach me that real power lies not in controlling others, but in the courage to let love control you." Sophia's smile held all the warmth of summer in the winter night. "I love you, Ethan Carter. And I love you, soon-to-be Mrs. Carter Wren." His eyes sparkled with joy. "Ready for our next adventure?" With you, she stretched up to kiss him softly. "I'm ready for everything." As they held each other under the winter stars, their hearts beating in perfect harmony, both knew that this was just the beginning. Their love story, which had started with one promised night, would continue for a lifetime of nights, each one more precious than the last. For sometimes, the greatest adventures begin with a single step or a single night. Sometimes, the most powerful love stories grow from moments of conflict. And sometimes, when two hearts are brave enough to choose love over everything else, magic happens. Just ask the corporate raider who learned to lead with his heart and the brilliant CEO who discovered that love only makes you stronger. They'll tell you that some promises are meant to last forever. One night had become forever, and forever was just the beginning.